So together we move into this holiday, shoulder to shoulder in this hard week. We breathe in. We are inspired. Let us hold this holiday as healing for us and for the world. Let us hold this holiday as healing, as the potential of healing, of wisdom that can bring healing to Israel and Palestine. And healing each of us to our deepest selves. Welcome. And so I have the pleasure of introducing for our first presentation tonight, Marcia Falk. Dr. Marcia Falk is a poet, a painter, a Judaic scholar. She is the author of The Book of Blessings, New Jewish Prayers for Daily Life, a book that I am certain is on many of our shelves. She's also the author of The Days Between, Blessings, Poems, and Directions of the Heart for the Jewish High Holiday Season, and Inner East, Illuminated Poems and Blessings, as well as other books of poetry and translation. I will add that her poetic translation of Song of Songs has long been my go-to, and many of you who are here from Ner Shalom have already heard her words that way. One of the ways that we make magic in the Jewish tradition is through ritual and symbolic enactment. At Pesach time, we gather around the table, we ascribe meanings to food, we tell story, we invoke our past and our future, our constraints and our liberations, and by doing so, we bring ourselves deeper into our own liberation. Magic. Marcia is in the process of reworking the magic of Seder. Her new haggadah, Night of Beginnings, is forthcoming from the Jewish Publication Society and University of Nebraska Press in 2022. And tonight, on this night of revelation, secrets of the new haggadah will be revealed. It is a great honor to introduce Dr. Marcia Falk.
Thank you, Reb Irwin. Let's see, I don't want to look at myself. Let me get rid of myself here. Okay. And thank you all for having me. It's a great pleasure. As you know, probably, I'm a member of one of your sister congregations, the Chavurah or Zarua. Many of whom probably won't be here tonight because I've given a similar talk already at a Shabbat. I told them all not to come because, you know, they heard me. How many times you got to hear me? So, but it's great to meet all of you. And I'm going to leave some time at the end of my talk for your questions and comments. Please don't put them in the chat. Well, you can put them in the chat, but I won't see them because I don't look at the chat while I'm talking. So save them up if you can to ask me afterwards when I finish talking. So what I also wanted to thank Barbara and Sherry and Irwin, and if there are others I'm forgetting, for coordinating all this and putting up with my technophobia and helping me on this Zoom. So what I want to do tonight is read a little and discuss with you a bit from my new haggadah, which I've been working on for about 3 or 4 decades. But who's counting, right? It began when I felt like I needed something to do for our family Seder, especially after our son was born, and it became crucial that all of our Jewish celebrations be done in a heartfelt, meaningful way. The haggadah did not start out being a haggadah. I never intended to write a haggadah. What a project. I mean, who would take that on? This huge kind of, forgive me, mishmash of a text, with all the moving parts. But I just wanted to create some new brachot, some new blessings for the Seder to replace the traditional rabbinic blessings that are all, as you know, steeped in the patriarchal image of the divine, which long ago did not work for me. So I created this set of brachot, and then having done that, I thought, well, I might as well kind of write kavanot to go with the brachot. Kavanot are what I call these little prose poems / meditations that I write to amplify the meanings of the brachot, of the blessings. Excuse me one sec. Steve, could you keep the doors closed? I'm on Zoom, thanks. Sorry, I'm very easily distracted. I should get over that. But still, I did not intend to write a whole haggadah. That's how it began. And at one point, I realized that something important was missing for me in not just the traditional haggadah, but all the new ones that have been emerging since 1941 when Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan introduced his new haggadah. He called it the new haggadah, which should tell you why it's important never to name your book The New Anything, because there will be lots of news to come after you. So you won't be new anymore. So name yourself something else. My haggadah is not the new haggadah. It's called Night of Beginnings, and I'll explain why in a bit. Why write a new haggadah? The poet Ezra Pound famously said, "Make it new." But he was followed by the poet Jack Gilbert, who said, "Make it significantly new." Not newness for its own sake. I wanted to bring new meanings to the Seder. I wanted to create a radical, and that's in air quotes, because what I mean by radical, when I wanted to create a radical haggadah, it was one that would return to its roots in Tanakh, in Hebrew Bible, in the story of our liberation from Egypt and our journey to become a people that you find in Exodus, the first 15 chapters. It begins in the first 15 chapters, it goes on, but what we focus on Pesach is that story that begins with our being in Egypt enslaved and gets us to the Sea of Reeds. When I say I want to return us to that, that story is not told. It's not told in whole, in a continuous narrative form, in any haggadah that I'm aware of. We get bits and pieces, interspersed with bits and pieces of what the rabbis had to say, what the next generation of rabbis had to say, and what the generation after that had to say, and what we're saying today. But we don't get that whole story laid out for us in the haggadah, and haggadah means telling, right? And so I wanted to do that. It was in some ways the most difficult part of creating this haggadah was telling the story, the whole story, but obviously compressed, and getting the heart of it in there, because couldn't have all 15 chapters of the book of Shemot in there. I want to give you a heads up. I am going to read a little bit from the Maggid. The Maggid is the story. A little later, I'm going to begin with some of the blessings and the kavanot. And when we get to the Maggid, which in my haggadah is the centerpiece, and I've restructured the haggadah so that it's basically before the Maggid, and after the Maggid. So that the other pieces kind of relate to the Maggid. In my Maggid, you will not find a revisioned or recreated God, divinity. You will see the same old male God, the he, okay? And if you're wondering why, here's why. I am presenting the story as it's told in our ancient text. I am interspersing it with commentaries of my own and questions that I'm raising for us to discuss. But much as I like to recreate liturgy, because liturgy is always changing, and liturgy is what we speak out of our own throats and our own mouths and want to say what we mean, I don't rewrite our ancient texts. We need to know where we come from, and we need to study it to understand, to really understand our history. So I'm telling you all this ahead of time so you won't be shocked when you hear God referred to as he, even with a capital He, in my Maggid. Because people, their initial thought is, wait a minute, why is Marcia Falk referring to God as he? I'm not. Tanakh is, and that's our sacred text. It's our foundational text, and I want to study our foundational text in the Seder, in Seder night. So that I will read you a little bit of that, but I am going to start with other pieces, and that's the other pieces that I mentioned, the blessings and the kavanot, or sort of the other sense in which I think of this haggadah as radical, and that's because those things I really do challenge the rabbinic, patriarchal, divine, AKA God, but I don't use that word because that's a very limiting word. I only use it when I'm talking about Tanakh, okay? That distinction's sort of clear so I don't confuse people. So I'm gonna start, what I'm gonna do now is share my screen. Let's see if I do this right. There we go, I hope. Can you see what's up on my screen now is the cover of my haggadah. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can see it fine, thank you.
Great, oh, wow. I did that. Now let's see if I can skip page numbers without. What I want to start with is one of the blessings in the haggadah, and it's the blessing for karpas. Let me see if I can get to page 30. Hold on, I'll do this. Control F. There we go. 30. Oh, come on. Here we go. Here's karpas. Now, karpas, the spring greens, you know, this is where we eat the parsley and the crudités at the beginning of the Seder, also celebrates the beginning of the year because this Pesach is one of the 4 Jewish New Years. And so my bracha for karpas conflates or brings together those 2 meanings, spring, the greening of the earth, and the new year. And that's why, one of the reasons why I call my book Night of Beginnings, because we are beginning the year here. We're also beginning our saga, our story of becoming a people. So here's the karpas bracha. Dipping, oh, and one other thing, all of my brachot each one has a unique biblical epigraph. My most fun part of writing this book was finding the biblical epigraphs, and they're obviously the best writing in the book. So Karpas begins with, the vine shall give forth its fruit, the earth will yield its harvest, and the skies shall provide their dew. And that's from Zechariah. At this festival of spring, as we welcome the newly budding year, let us bless the source that awakens the greening of the earth. Tfilat Karpas va'achilato. Hagefen titen pirya, v'haaretz titen et yevula, v'hashamayim yitnu talam. B'chag ha'aviv hazeh nekabel et pnei hashana, unvarech et hamayan ha'me'orer et prichat ha'aretz. I am not going to read you the kavanah, just to save time. I'm going to move ahead, but almost every blessing has a kavanah. I'm going to go next to, here's the Song of Songs that Rabbi Irwin mentioned. There's pieces of it in the haggadah, because nothing celebrates spring like the Song of Songs. But I'm going to go next to a piece of the haggadah that we don't pay a lot of attention to ritually. That is to say, it has no blessing. And that's yachatz, which is the moment at the beginning of the Seder when the leader breaks the middle matzah, takes the larger piece, which we call the afikoman, and hides it so that the children can have something to look for during the Seder. And at the end of the Seder, they'll get a reward for presenting it to the leader, because we need it to end the Seder meal. Now, the tradition actually doesn't give this words, okay? It's an action, but it doesn't have a blessing. It doesn't have a blessing. I did not write a blessing for it, but I did write a kavanah. And here is the kavanah. And you'll get a sense of my intention to bring a kind of personal level of meaning into the moments of the Seder. This is called brokenness and wholeness. Loss, suffering, hopelessness, broken spirit, broken self. Our lives are broken off by death. The human condition is brokenness. But there is also another kind of breaking, the breaking open of the heart that puts us in touch with our deeper selves, and that may even serve as a gateway to wholeness. What is wholeness of self? Does it depend on outer connections, bonds between self and other, between self and world? Is it the feeling that one is part of a greater whole? Or is it an interconnectedness, an awareness, a knowingness sustained from within, a bringing forth to consciousness the hidden parts of the self? And might this deepened consciousness offer a path to freedom? Or is wholeness all these things and perhaps more? We dwell in a world of brokenness, but we yearn and strive for wholeness. It is elusive, but it is our birthright. The pursuit of wholeness is the human calling. I'm going to move now to the four children, AKA the four sons. The rabbis didn't realize that girls existed and would be at the Seder table. They barely realized that women would be there. Whoops, not 45, I'm on page 54. So they, no, okay. Hang in there with me. Four children. So they wrote the four children they addressed 4 sons, and you know who those 4 sons are, right? The wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son who does not know how to ask. I've reconceived this piece as the 4 children inside ourselves, within ourselves, all at once. That is, these are parts of ourselves that coexist. And this is how I understand the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. The wise child, the child who wants to know. The child who wants to know has an inquisitive mind and an open heart. When she asks what and how, she wants to hear the whole story. To this child, you give full answers because nothing less will do. When you don't know what to say, you keep looking. This child brings you the world. The child who feels apart and alone. There is another child who is hungry for truth, but of a different kind. He wants to know more about you. He asks what this holiday means to you. This child too is studying the world, your world. He is trying to find himself in you, through you. Don't turn him away. Let him cross your borders. He will bring you insight and surprise. The simple child asks the question that goes straight to the heart, stripping away pretense and complication. What is this? They ask. When the other children have finished their questioning, the simple child persists, asking, why? The simple child's question may be the most difficult one to answer. Nevertheless, try. This is the child who moves us on. This is the one who will change the world. The child who cannot ask. And then there is the child who cannot ask. She is cloaked in wonder. Her voice is silence. She is who we were once before. She hasn't left us, but she is often hidden, and we find her at unpredictable times. We cannot call this child to us with words. She comes unbidden, and when she comes, the world reveals itself suffused in beauty, beauty of which we are a part. Bless this moment, bless this child, nothing more to do. Blessed be the child beyond all questions. And she'll come back a little later in the ceremony. A major theme, as I see it in the story, is the theme of hiddenness and openness. And we have it mirrored in the Seder, where we have the tzafun at the very end. Hidden is when the hidden afikomen is presented. So this child will come back to us. Let's see now. I want to be mindful of time. I am going to briefly mention halachma anya. Oh, came right up, good. It's in Aramaic. I tried as much as possible throughout to make everything gender inclusive when it had to do with people, or anything except, again, not touching the Bible story. Halachma anya is written in Aramaic, so that was kind of a challenge for me. I had to consult my Aramaic expert friends who told me how to say slaves in the feminine and the masculine. I said, well, how do you say non-binary slaves? Nobody knew, so we had to settle for avdei v'amhan, limit to what we can do. But what I wanted to point out to you about halachma anya is that it goes from past to present. This is the bread, matzah is the bread of affliction, which our ancestors ate. But today, let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need share our Pesach. And the kavanah for this is called Open Door, which I will not read in the interest of saving time. I will just read the opening sentence of, and that is, a home that is open to all, the sacred promise of the United States, which is all too often forgotten and is written about most beautifully by the American Sephardic Jewish poet Emma Lazarus, who wrote the poem The New Colossus, which she wrote it in 1883, and it was affixed to our Statue of Liberty in 1903. I won't read it for the sake of time, but read it. It's a wonderful sonnet, and I'm just going to read the last 5 lines, which you know by heart already. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. So that's halachma. I'm going to skip for now. If there's time, I'll come back to it. I'm going to skip b'chol dor vador. In every generation needs to feel as though it has left Egypt. I just want to mention that I rewrote it, and it fits the same melody, and it has 2 stanzas now, which talk about our, not a man, but our leaving Egypt. And then the second stanza talks about the individual I leaving Egypt. You know what I'm talking about, right? Nod your heads if you do. B'chol dor vador chayav. And then the traditional one goes, chayav adam lirot et atzmo Ke'ilu yatsa miMitzrayim. Well, I rewrote it to Bechol dor vador chova aleinu lirot et atzmeinu ke'ilu yatsanu miMitzrayim. So every generation, we need to see ourselves. And then the next stanza. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Magid. B'chol dor vador talks about telling the story, and now we start this. Oh, and here's a little poem that precedes the Magid called Telling Oneself into the Story, which I won't read now. I'm just going to read you a very small portion of the Magid so you get a sense of what I'm trying to do, what I hope will be interesting to you. In the Bible, the stuff here in small bold is the commentary and my commentary and my questions that I raise. So in the story, we know that Pharaoh's daughter rescued the baby Moshe, brought him to the palace, adopted him, and raised him as her own. It's a remarkable act. It doesn't take place anywhere else in Tanakh, that someone who was not a Hebrew takes in a Hebrew child. So it's a really remarkable act, and yet we don't know her name, and we never find out her name. And in that sense, she's hidden from us. I mentioned the motif of hiddenness comes back and back. So here's the commentary. After I tell the story, which is straight out of Tanakh, condensed, in acting to save the baby's life, Pharaoh's daughter is unique in the Bible. She takes in a child who is not of her people and raises him as her own. Hers is an act of great compassion that also constitutes a rebellion against authority. In saving the Hebrew child, she defies the orders of her father, who is both king and God to the Egyptians. Despite her remarkable actions, her name is withheld from us until the end. Miriam's name is withheld from us at the beginning of the story, where she too is very important, taking care of the baby. She is given a name and a title at the end. At the Sea of Reeds, she's called Miriam the prophetess. But not Pharaoh's daughter. We'll never know her name. And then I have a comment here about the empathetic acts of all the women in the story. So that's the midwives and Moshe's mother and his sister. And I talk about how those acts exemplify an ethic of care. And later I will talk about the men in the story. So that would include Moshe, Pharaoh, and God. And I talk about the women and the men. And I make a comment here that while the biblical narrative focuses on the male characters, the fate of the Hebrews, we learn, is equally dependent on the less elaborated acts of the women. Okay, I am cognizant of the time, so no need to remind me yet. I have it in mind. I am going to move on to Kos Miriam, because at the very end of the Magid, the end is her her celebration at the Sea of Reeds, and so it's a natural segue into Miriam's cup. Miriam's cup, as you know, is a new, well, it's not so new anymore. It's probably half a century now, but, you know, a more recent contribution to the Seder ritual. Some people put it next to Elijah's cup. I don't want to do that. I want to give her her own place. Why should she share the stage? And I think this is the place, because we just finished talking about her, and we heard about the well that accompanied the Israelites in the desert. And that, according to the rabbis, was in the merit of Miriam. So, by the way, there's an abbreviated Magid that's much shorter that follows the full one. So you can do this, you can keep your Seder shorter if you like, but what you might do is read this abbreviated version and then go back and pick a section from the larger Magid and discuss it. Anyway, those are just ideas how to use this. Okay, so now after the Magid celebrating the story, here's Miriam's cup. And of course it begins with the quote from Shemot: Miriam, the prophet's sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her dancing with timbrels. Zion heard and was happy, the daughters of Judah rejoiced. Let us bless the living waters, fountains and well springs, rivulets, rivers and streams that sustain all life. Kos Miriam, Vatikach Miriam Hanfia, Achot Aharon, et hatof biada, Vatetzena chol hanashim achorecha betupim ubimcholot. Nevarech et me ha'ayanot ume hanchalim ume haneharot mayim chayim hamarvim kol chai. And I am going to talk for a moment about Dayenu. Dayenu, you know, one of the top 10 hits of the Seder, right? We all have to sing Dayenu. But really, what personal meaning does it have for us? I really thought a lot about that, because really, I don't feel like we bring a lot of intentionality to Dayenu. So I thought, well, what is enough? What do we mean by enough? I have a poem here called Nonetheless, which is about that, but I'm going to read you the kavanot called what is enough. We begin as nothing and we end as nothing. And in between, everything and nothing. In between joy and sorrow, beauty and decay. Everything ours to partake of, ours to bear, ours to see, to know, to give birth to, and to let go. None of it ours to have. Not even ourselves are ours to have. We belong to a wholeness so great we cannot even conceive of it. No, it is not a belonging. Nothing owns us. We are simply part of it. We came out of it and we will return to it. We do not ever leave it. We are part of it forever. And is this not enough? More than enough. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of very short things and then ask you, turn it over to you, to comment, ask questions, or if you want, you can ask me for one of your top 10 hits for the haggadah, and if I have something for it, I'll read it for you. Okay, I want to read maror, the bitter herb. So the kavanot there is a poem, and it has to do, with that everythingness and the nothingness, how kind of the embracing of it all. Sweet and salt, bitter and sweet. Sweet, the newborn sprig greening. Salt, tears hardening to rock. Salt, blood rushing to the heart. Bitter, teeth biting the earth. Bitter, side by side with sweet, and the sweet becomes sweeter. Everything and its opposite unfolding, life enfolding it all. And I am going to close with something that I call the promise of Elijah. What do we do with Elijah? He's supposed to bring about redemption, right? So we open the door for him, but he can't bring redemption unless we do our job. That's right. He's just the symbol of that. This is the promise of Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi. We open the door to Elijah and meet ourselves at the threshold. May we find our callings here to mend the broken world and make whole what is wounded and torn. Soon, in our own time, may healing blossom in our hands. And now, I think I actually have 2 more minutes, but I'm going to give them to you. And then if you want me to read more later, I will. I'll be happy to. But now, here you are back in front of my screen. And comments, questions, requests are happily invited. So if you want to raise your hand and let me know that you want to speak, and if I don't see you, perhaps
Raising hands is going to be a little bit.
Rabbi Irwin or Barbara or somebody, Shari, will see you. So I'm looking on my first screen. I don't see any hands. I'm going to go to my...
Marcia, I think if people...
Irwin, I don't hear you. Wait a minute.
Wait,
say it again.
This is Irwin. And
yeah.
I would suggest if you have a question, just unmute and we'll be able to see, the hosts will be able to see that you have unmuted. So Basha.
Yes. I just wanted to thank you, especially for the Dayenu, where you bring in the whole cosmos and the whole cycle of life and ask, isn't that enough? I just thought that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad. Someone else? I can just go back to reading. I have no problem with that, but I'd rather hear from you. So,
Barbara Lesh McCaffrey, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Just admiration for the poetry. I'm really loving it, and I'm looking forward to coming back to it. It's so fresh and so simple and so accessible. So very much in awe. Thank you.
thank you, Barbara. I believe in simple. I believe in accessible.
I have a question.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. I'd like to know what it feels like doing this project. You know, many people have done reworkings of haggadah, and you come in not only as a scholar but as a poet who repeatedly tonight declined to read her own poetry out of humility. And I'm just curious what this is a lot of time you're spending on this. What has this felt like for you?
Well, you know, writing altogether, projects like this, they're my drug of choice. I mean, the immersion in a project, listen, it really saved me throughout COVID. I did not experience the sort of boredom of COVID because I just sunk myself in this. That's what it's like for me, Erwin, working on all of these books. I kind of am in between books. That's the hard part. When I'm sort of in this vacuum and not knowing what's next, which I'm about to enter into now because I finished this book and it now goes to the publisher who hangs on to it for 9 months before it brings it out. You know, that's the hard part. What do I do next? I'm open to suggestions. But what did it feel like to do it? It felt like I love immersing myself in Jewish text. I just love it. I love opening up the concordance, opening up, you know, Evan Shoshan, the Hebrew dictionary. It's just my greatest pleasure. And then, like I say, it's my drug of choice because it distracts me from myself and all my little worries. You know, so is that an answer to your question? I don't know if it is.
It's a beautiful answer. Thank you. Warren Wiscombe, I see that you are unmuted. Do you have a question for Marcia?
No, that was a mistake. Sorry.
It's too late. Think of one.
Yeah.
Oh, not really. No, thanks.
Okay.
Wow, you are a quiet group. You're very quiet. Maybe I keep saying Ner Tamid. I know you're Ner Shalom. Maybe Ner Shalom is not as feisty as Or Zarua.
Well, watch out, because here comes Leah Bowden. Leah?
Okay, Leah Bowden.
Hey, I'm sorry, it's not a feisty question.
Oh, that's fine.
Not only do I
teasing.
love the simplicity of your poetry, which is exquisite, I'm intrigued by the drawings. And I'm wondering, I didn't look carefully to see if I could recognize exactly what they were supposed to be. Where did you draw your ideas from to do those specific drawings?
Yeah, I drew the drawings, if that's what you're asking. They're my drawings.
No, I'm asking
where I got the idea. They're all spring flowers. Wait, hang on for 1 sec. I'm going to share my screen for another second. So there are these black and white drawings that accompany individual pieces, or blue. The colors in the book represent the different sections. So all the blessings are in this apricot color. The Magid is in sage green. They're all edibles. The kavanot or blueberry, and the hallel, which I didn't read from tonight, but that's in peach. But what I wanted to show you, okay, so the sections of the book each have their own colored flower, and the flowers are the ranunculus, the nurit, and the anemone, the kalanit, which are wildflowers that grow in Israel. So that's where I got my ideas.
Thanks.
Spring flowers.
Chaya Pritchett.
This is partially me proving you wrong about how quiet a group we are.
Good.
Because I get this urge whenever anyone accuses a group of being quiet, like I have to prove them wrong, at least for me.
You go for it.
But I was thinking when you presented on the 4 children, that they were all children inside of ourselves, particularly like the child that cannot ask is often interpreted as one that's too young to have speech. But I remembered that some people never gain speech. And I was wondering if that crossed your mind at all when you wrote that.
Well, I'm talking
people
about
who can't speak by word of mouth.
Well, I
can
was
still
really
participate.
Sure, Chaya. I was really talking about a number of things, including the silence inside ourselves. There's parts of us that can't speak, and there are people who can't speak aloud with their mouths, but they are the same humanity as those of us who can speak aloud with our mouths, but sometimes can't speak. We can't, so all of the above. But thank you for pointing that out.
Marcia?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I'm curious as to how you handled the plagues.
Oh, yeah.
And especially in light of COVID and in the world we're living in now, environmentally, and the fires and drought we're living in, it just seems like suffering is something that that's very relevant as we experience the plagues.
Well, yeah, suffering's always relevant, isn't it? I mean, that's, yeah. Look, the plagues are not my favorite part of the story. And they're probably not your favorite part either. What I don't do, what so many contemporary haggadot do, which is pretty common today in many seders, I don't say, and what are our plagues today? And ask for racism and sexism. I don't do that. I do I mean, not that that's not a valid thing to do. I'm just saying that that's not what I do. What I do is look at it as part of the story, the plagues, and see what the rabbis had to say about God's treatment of the Egyptians, which is, the rabbis are ambivalent about it. It's, I can't get into it now, but it's part of my commentary. In terms of suffering, which I totally agree with you, it's always with us. I try to speak about that in brokenness, in that kavanah. Can't really remember what else I do with the plagues in the Magid. I was telling my co-hosts earlier in the evening that I don't have any memory cells left, not even for my own work. I'd have to open up the book. But I wanted to do something different from what's done today in so many Seders. I didn't want, because to me it feels too easy, feels too automatic to just list our plagues today. Especially because we sort of, well, no, I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
Marcia, this is Erwin, and thank you, and I appreciate that. I also struggle with that around the plagues, about the listing of, in that it pulls us out of the story in some ways. It's also limiting, it's time limited, and it also can have ways of actually trivializing very serious things. And so I really appreciate your thinking and your sort of holding fast with that one.
Thank you. I'm really interested to hear that, because I wasn't sure how that would come across. So thank you.
Well, who knows how it'll come across with other people, so you can be anxious. But I was hoping you could wrap up tonight by giving us one more poem out of the Haggadah, maybe something from Shir HaShirim.
Oh, you want Shir HaShirim? Let's see. I have to, since I don't know anything by heart, I have to put the screen back on. Shir HaShirim asher lishlomo yishakeni. Let me see if I can get to it. If you want Shir HaShirim, I'll give you Shir HaShirim. Oh, come on. I will get there in a minute. Shir HaShirim, by the way, is in pink. You know, love poems. Okay, so all the poems I chose from Shir HaShirim, from Song of Songs, are spring poems, because Shir HaShirim, as you know, really celebrates the natural world. It's really our most beautiful biblical text. So I guess this is the first one that popped up. Is that what I should read? Yeah, I'll read the first one. This is Kumilach Rayati Yafati Ulechilach. Come with me, my love. Come away. For the long, wet months are past. The rains have fed the earth and left it bright with blossoms. Birds wing in the low skies, dove and songbird singing in the open air above. Earth nourishing tree and vine, green fig and tender grape, green and tender fragrance. Come with me, my love, come away.
All of Torah right there.
Yeah.
So, Marcia, what a pleasure and honor to have you here. What an exciting project. I think we're all looking forward to. Hopefully it'll be out in 2022 in time for Pesach.
I hope so.
So we'll look forward to.
Thank you so much for, except for my little thing at War Sarua on Shabbos, this is really my first coming out with this book. So you're my first audience, my maiden voyage. And I really thank you for having me. And so many of you attended, my goodness. Thank you again, all of you.
Forward to,
Thank you, Asha.
We'll be looking forward to reading your commentary.